everyone, this is Joe from Scarecrow Joe Studio, and welcome back to part 2 of our paper mache pirate skull tutorial. In our last segment, I showed you how to create a very simple armature for your skull and your pirate hat. In this second segment, part 2, we're going to go ahead and start sculpting this thing out, and we're going to make some accessories like an eye patch and some teeth for your pirate skull. But before we start, as always, let's go over tools and materials that you're going to need for this section of the tutorial. Okay, tools and materials needed for this section. Obviously, you're going to need your pirate skull armature. You'll need a small piece of corrugated cardboard, a marker, pair of scissors, an old piece of cloth, black cloth or brown cloth or whatever. This is just a ratty old black t-shirt, so something similar to that. You'll need some paper mache paste and some paint brushes for smoothing your paper mache clay. And of course, because we're going to start sculpting, you're going to need some of that paper mache clay. You'll need some various, maybe some sculpting tools. These are very cheap. This is a plastic spoon that I use a lot. Something else that's optional is oven baked polymer clay. I use the original Sculpey brand. You can use this type of clay instead of your paper mache clay to create teeth. Or I'm going to experiment with this. This is Durham's water putty. And I'm going to create some teeth out of this just to see how that stands out and how it looks or stands up in comparison to my usual Sculpey clay that I use for teeth. And I think that's about it, so let's get moving on this. Alright, first thing that I'm going to do here is I'm going to apply a thin layer of my clay on this entire skull. I am not going to apply any clay to my pirate hat quite yet. And obviously we're going to have to sculpt this thing out in sections. It's going to be impossible to sculpt the whole thing out in one sitting because you're going to have to handle it. So I like to start on just applying a thin layer of the paper mache clay so that I have a nice strong base layer of clay. After it's dry, I'll go in and I'll actually sculpt in, apply more clay, and sculpt in the details. Bring out the cheekbones, the jaw, and then that's when I'll actually apply my teeth as well. So first things first, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start here, just a real thin layer of clay, and just pressing it into that eye socket. All the way in there. And you have probably already noticed that my eye sockets here, they're not symmetrical by any means. I'm not concerned about it being symmetrical because one of them is going to be covered with an eye patch, so it doesn't matter. That newspaper cone that we inserted and glued inside here to block in the eye socket openings work really well to give it the appearance of a hollow eye socket without it actually being hollow. This is important, especially if you are planning on putting this thing outside in some sort of a outdoor display. Maybe you have a pirate theme Halloween display that you're working on or that you're thinking about, and you want to put something like this outside. You don't really want to have a whole lot of opening. The only opening that we're going to end up having is this nasal cavity. It's going to be a very small opening, so it's really not going to matter. But the eyes, by applying the thin layer of clay into these eye sockets, it'll protect it more from weather. So I'm going to go in, I applied that thin layer of clay to the eye sockets. I'm just going in with my paper mache paste and a paintbrush, dipped in the paste, and that's going to smooth that out in there. Again, I'm not really concerned about getting it completely smooth, but that is going to smooth it out. You're not going to get this type of clay completely smooth. It's impossible. It's just not that type of material. This clay, on how to make this type of clay, is on my channel. There's 2 different variations. There's one on how to make a large batch of this clay and a variation on how to make a smaller batch. This paper mache clay, the primary ingredient for the paper source is actually cellulose fiber insulation. It's just basically ground up newspaper and paper fibers, basically, is what it is. Some people love it, some people hate it. I use it for probably 90% of my paper mache art, because it's very cost effective. So if you're going to make a lot of paper mache art, that's the way to go. You can get a big bale of the cellulose fiber insulation for about $15 at any large hardware store or home improvement store. So I'm just going to carry on here, and like I said, I'm not going to be concerned about actually sculpting details right now. I just want to get a base layer, a thin base layer on the entire skull. So I'm just going to work my way all the way around, get that base layer on, get inside the mouth there as well. And then I'll flip this thing over, and I'll do the base layer on the bottom sections. And obviously that's one of the reasons why I'm not going to be doing or working on sculpting out the hat, because I need to put this upside down once I'm done with this so it can dry completely. Now, before I continue on here, just something that I want to point out. When I got to the mouth area, now I have very small hands, and I could get my fingers in there. If you have larger hands, you're going to need something to help you get that clay in there. So anything like this, that'll help you push that clay in there and push it down a lot easier. So keep that in mind so that you're not frustrated with that. On the nasal cavity, I did get some clay, just a little bit of clay around the edge of the nasal cavity or the opening, so that that's kind of smoothed over and blocked in a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and continue on and applying my thin layer of clay. Alright, I have my thin layer of clay over, except for the back part and the bottom, over the entire skull. And I'm going to go in again with some of my paper mache paste and my paintbrush. And just like I did with the eye sockets, I'm going to smooth over this entire thing so that it's not so lumpy. And I have a nice smooth surface, so when it dries I can go in on a smoother surface and bulk up and start sculpting in the details on this thing. Alright, I have gone in and I have smoothed everything out with some paper mache paste using a paintbrush. For good measure, I'm going to go ahead and smooth it out even more by using my spoon here. I find plastic spoons are great for smoothing paper mache clay after you've applied some paste. I also use these little tools a lot too. But just to get it even smoother for me, I'm going to go in and use my plastic sculpting tools here. And after I get it smoothed over, I'll go in and I'll redefine the eye sockets, the mouth, and the nasal cavity. Alright, I've got that all smoothed over. I'm just going to go in. I have a smaller paintbrush. I'm just going to go in with a little bit more of my paste and just redefine the eye sockets here. Again, they're not completely symmetrical or the same size. They don't need to be, because one of them is going to be covered with an eye patch. Probably that one. I'll come in here. I lost some of the area of my nasal cavity, so I'm going to redefine that. I'll come in here with my little sculpting tool. If you've watched some of my other videos, I always tell you where I get this set of sculpting tools. They're from Michael's Art and Craft Store. They're super cheap. I use them a lot. They come in really handy. But that's where you could pick those up at. All right. That's pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this thing over, and I'm going to apply another thin layer of clay on the bottom. But as you could probably see, if you notice, I've got big lumps of the hot glue on there. It's one of the reasons why it hasn't, my skull here does not sit flat. I'm going to rectify that by applying probably a thicker layer of clay on this areas where it does touch on the bottom. And I'm going to need to, I got a big old lump of glue right there, so I'm going to need some thicker clay in there. Once I get it applied and smoothed over, then I'm going to sit it flat to see that it actually does sit flat. So that's what I'm going to do next. And I'm not, it's impossible for me to film these things and show all the steps, applying all the clay and all that. I don't think it's necessary. It gets pretty redundant. But I can't film and apply all the clay and everything and show it 100%. Because I'm picking this thing up, I'm putting it in my lap, I'm applying the clay. So that's one of the main reasons. But I'm going to carry on the bottom, and then I'll show you what that looks like. I've got that clayed over. Before I smooth it, I want to sit it. Yeah, I think that evens that out. It's not going to wobble like it was. So I'm going to go ahead and take my, once again, my paper mache paste and smooth all that out. Alright, and there you have it, at least for now. Can't do anything else until this whole thing is completely dry. So put yours in front of a fan or outside in the sun to aid the drying process. Probably going to take about 24 hours. Shouldn't be any longer than that. I did bulk up a little bit more so that it sits flat. So those areas will take a little bit longer to dry. But I'm thinking about 24 hours, and I can get back to actually sculpting in the details, bulking up the features, and then we'll allow that to dry, and we'll move on to the hat. But in the meantime, while this is drying, I'm going to show you how to create your eye patch and the teeth. So while we are patiently waiting for our skull to dry with that thin layer of clay that we applied over it, I'm going to take the time and just move into some accessories that you can apply to your pirate skull. First one is going to be how to create a very, very simple eye patch. And then we'll go into some other little decorative items that you can incorporate into your pirate hat, such as little skulls and crossbones, or different things like that, different little accessories or adornments just to make your pirate skull and the pirate hat more refined and give it a lot more interest. I have in front of me here two skulls that I made a while back, and I started painting them. I wasn't sure what I was going to end up doing with them, so I just kind of set them aside. Well, it turns out that they're going to come in handy for this demonstration. So I'll move forward and show you how to create, first and foremost, we'll move forward and show you how to create a very simple eye patch. Alright, first and foremost, you're going to want to fire up your hot glue gun, get that nice and hot. You're going to need that. First thing that I've done is I've taken that old black t-shirt of mine and I cut a strip out of it. So you're going to need to do that, cut a strip out of it. Don't worry so much about the length. Make sure you have a good enough length because you can always trim it down. So to create an eye patch, you're going to take that piece of corrugated cardboard and a very simple shape. And I'm using my my two skulls here as a reference. I'll show you on this guy. It has bigger eye holes. And then I'll also probably make a smaller one because these eye hole or eye sockets here, they're about the same size as the eye sockets on my actual pirate skull that I'm working on for this tutorial. So I'm probably going to try to make something. You want to make it about as big as that to cover the eye. You don't need to get very elaborate. You could do a very simple shape. You could do a shape just kind of like an oval type of a shape. Something like that. Or, you know, you can do a shape kind of like a half circle type shape. Whatever your heart desires. Again, you can use reference pictures if you have those of pirates that have eye patches on. So pretty simple. I'm gonna go ahead and cut these two eye patches out of my corrugated cardboard, and then we'll move forward. Right, so I have these three different shapes of eye patches here. Half circle, sort of like that. Bring that forward. Half circle, sort of like that. More of a sort of like a heart shape without the indentation of the heart up on the top there. And then I have just the basic oval shape there. So these are just a few different variations of an eye patch. I'm going to use this one. I like this one, so I'm going to go ahead and use this one for the purpose of this tutorial. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay, got my eye patch here, I'm going to lay it so it's sort of in the middle of my cloth. And I'm going to go ahead and cut my cloth right about there. Get rid of that. And very basic, my hot glue. I'm just going to come in here and hot glue the cloth. Hot glue the end of the cloth onto the back of the eye patch. Do the same thing on the other side. Just like that. I'm going to let that cool. And then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to get that eye patch sculpted out and then attached. You can permanently attach your eye patch if you really wanted to, but using this technique, it gives you the option of moving your eye patch from one eye to the other eye by just tying it on. So that's pretty much the whole point of this method here of attaching an eye patch. That's pretty much how it will look. But I'm going to go ahead and sculpt over this cardboard eye patch here. Just taking some of my paper mache clay, and I'm just laying it right over this corrugated cardboard cut out of an eye patch. Doesn't need to be very thick. A thin layer is going to be fine. Just making sure that I'm getting the edges of it. I'm not worried about the back at all. So I've got that thin layer of clay over that, and I made sure I got the sides. Otherwise, when I go to paint this little eye patch, if I didn't cover over the edges, it's going to look like that. It'll look like corrugated cardboard, and you don't want that. You want it to look like an eye patch. So again, with my paintbrush and my paste, I'm just going to smooth that over. I'm going to go in with my little sculpting tool, smooth that over a little bit more. Now you could, before you attach your cloth to the back of your eye patch, you could do this sculpting part of it first. That way you don't have to worry so much about getting paint on your cloth if you want it to remain a piece of black cloth, or if you're using a piece of brown cloth or red cloth, whatever color. Otherwise, you do run the risk of getting some paint on there. But I'm doing this just to show you real quick for the purpose of this tutorial. I'm going to press in some texture using a fork. I'm just going to, not with the tines down, because that's just going to rip apart all those paper fibers that are in that paper mache clay. But with the tines facing up, I'm just going to press in some texture, just some lines. So if you wanted to do that and not have like this solid eye patch, that's a really good and simple way to just press in some texture. I don't know if you can see that or not. Something like that. You can do some cross hatching. I mean, whatever your heart desires. By just pressing in some of that texture, just like that. There we go. Pretty simple. So set that aside to dry if you're following along, and that's going to be good to go. Another thing that you can do is to add an adornment. If you wanted to add a little skull to your eye patch, you can certainly do that. You don't have to make them. I've made, here's one example of just a very basic little skull that I created out of polymer oven baked clay, Sculpty clay. Again, very basic. You can do like skull and crossbones, and you can sink those into your eye patch to adorn an eye patch. You can also do that as well on a pirate skull. But you don't have to make your own if you don't want to. You could pick up some really cheap little things like this at dollar stores, and use those and press those right in there. Here's another example. This is just a cheap little plastic tiny skull. So these are just two basic examples of skulls that you could pick up really cheaply at, like, Walmart even, or dollar store, something like that. So that's one example of some of the other things that you could do to adorn your eye patch. I'm going to keep mine pretty simple. I just have those cross patterns in there. I like that. It's not going to be anything fancy. because what's going to be fancy is what I'm going to do with the pirate hat, and that'll be later on in a different segment. I don't know how far I'm going to get in this segment. I'm going to get as far as I can and showing you some different things before we go on to the next segment and finish up the sculpts and continue working on that. So next up is what I want to show you is how to create some teeth. This is a very simple way to make teeth that are pretty uniform. So if you're wanting to make a lot of teeth that are basically about the same size, this is a good way of doing it instead of hand forming them and trying to get them all the same size. It's not perfect, but it does work. You're going to want a piece of thick corrugated cardboard. I didn't have a piece that was thick enough, so I took 2 pieces of corrugated cardboard and I cut out the size, or I took the 2 pieces of corrugated cardboard here and I glued them together on top of each other, and I cut out the size of the teeth that I'm looking to form. You're also going to need a piece of plastic grocery bag. This is just a piece of plastic grocery bag. First demonstration I'll do is using the I'll use the paper mache clay. So you want to take your plastic grocery bag, press it, get it pressed down inside your little push mold here of your tooth. Get some of your clay and fill inside your little mold, and then you just pop it out just like that. You might have to form it a little bit. My clay is very wet, but that's the basic idea, and you can churn out a bunch of these one right after another. They're going to be thick enough for your pirate skull, or whatever kind of teeth or creature that you're making that requires teeth. After you are done making your teeth, put them on a piece of plastic, like a piece of plastic grocery bag. Set them aside to dry. Do not place them on a piece of cardboard because it will adhere to the piece of cardboard. So that's my number one piece of advice if you're using this technique. And you are going to want to go ahead and make your teeth now so that you have them ready. So when we go back to start sculpting in the details, we will apply our teeth onto the skull. So you want to have these already ready and formed and dried for that. So that's just a basic demonstration on the push mold there. You can certainly use the same technique with any type of clay, whether it's oven-baked polymer clay such as Sculpey, or if it's an air dry clay. Same thing. Push your piece of plastic all the way down into the mold. Take a piece of the clay. This is the Sculpey clay, and just fill in that mold there with it all the way up. Press it all the way down, and then you can pop it right out, and there you go. You might have to do a little bit of smoothing, but that's not a big deal. But quick and easy way to make a series of teeth that are about the same size. Obviously, you can hand form them if you need really small teeth. You could go ahead and just hand form them, not a big deal. But I'm probably going to use the Sculpey air dry polymer clay. I'm going to play around a little bit off camera with the Durham's water putty. I've never used it before. I've had it for a long time, so I'm going to fool around with that, and then once that's dry, I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so I have one last thing that I'd like to demonstrate for you, because not all pirates wear pirate hats. Some of them just have like the head wrap. So I'm going to demonstrate how how to create that if you're wanting to make different variations of pirate skulls, some of them with pirate hats and some of them without. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Alright, adding a wrap or head wrap to your skull, if that's what you wanted to do in lieu of a pirate hat. A couple of different ways that you could do this. So one way is by attaching cloth dipped in paper mache paste and attaching it, something like that. This is way too much cloth than what I need, so I'm going to trim that down. For this technique, I have added some white glue to my basic paste mixture here of just flour and water. It'll make it a little bit more durable. Still pliable, but durable. So a couple of different ways. One of the first ways, we're going to get rid of this cloth here. You can use some shop towels. These are just blue shop towels. And I'm just going to cut off some pieces here. And I'm going to cut some strips. I'm going to use this skull for this demonstration. My blue shop towels, I've cut off some strips. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just dipping them, getting them saturated into my paste mixture here. Kind of squeegee it out with your fingers, and you can start by just applying them all the way around. I'm going to keep doing this on this. All the way around, attach them just like that. And you'll go all the way up the skull. Overlapping a little bit, but making sure that they're all kind of connected. Wrapping around the back again, pressing it into the skull. You can also use cloth, strips of cloth for this. If you don't want to use shop towels, you can use paper towels for this. Anything like that. So as you make your way up the skull, obviously the diameter is going to become smaller. And as you continue to wrap, obviously the diameter is getting smaller and smaller. And you just continue to place that around the rest of the saturated either cloth if you're using cloth, or shop towels or paper towels, whatever it is that you're using for this. I think one more and we've got it. Closing some of these gaps that I have. If you feel you have some gaps, you can either take more of the shop towels and wrap those around those areas where you have gaps. That's pretty much how that looks. This is going to dry very solid, very hard and stiff, so you won't have to worry about that. Now, if you wanted a little area where it kind of ties off, simply take another piece of your shop towel and you can pretty much just attach it anywhere. You can make a little loop and tie it. Something like that. You can attach it, wherever you want. I'm going to say right about like right there. And for good measure, on top of that, I'm going to take another strip of my shop towel and place it right over that. I made a mess. Again, this is going to dry very, very solid, but this is a very simple and effective technique on creating a head wrap for your pirate skull. I'm going to show you the cloth technique. That's going to be, I'll show you how to do that next. Method is simply using one piece of cloth. So you cut your piece of fabric so that it fits around your skull. Kind of covers the back of the skull. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. And then you go ahead and dip your piece of fabric into that paste mixture. Make sure you get it all saturated. Once you get it all goopy and saturated, you're going to want to go in and squeegee out the excess. You can also do this method by using Monster Mud. I don't find it necessary to use Monster Mud for this. I think just the paste mixture works well enough. So at that point, I'm just going to even out my piece of cloth here again. And simply attach it to my skull. Coming over, I'm kind of smoothing it over the back of the skull there. Well, I didn't do very well in this demonstration because I didn't use a piece of cloth that's big enough, but you get the idea. You're going to want the cloth to overlap on the back of your skull. Take another piece of cloth, cut it into a strip. Same thing. Dip it into your paste mixture. Squeegee out the excess. And then you can take this, turn this way so you can see it better. You can take that and you again can create another little tie off back here. If you wanted it longer, obviously you would make it longer. But that, my friends, is the gist of it. Super simple technique on how to make a head wrap using either pieces of cloth or shop towels or paper towels. But there you have it. Super simple and effective. Alright, so that's going to be a wrap on part 2 of our paper mache pirate skull tutorial. Giving you a lot to think about on how to create an eye patch, how to make some teeth, different head wraps. if you didn't want to create a pirate hat or you wanted to make different variations of pirates. So while you are waiting the 24 hours or 48 hours for your pirate skull to dry with that thin layer of clay over it, I've given you quite a bit to think about as far as accessories and making little things. And in the next segment, we're going to continue to sculpt, build out the features in our skull, do some work on the hat, and we'll be moving right along. So as always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.